Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time talking episode 7 of Supergirl called Human for a Day. And this is, I would say, a reasonably solid episode. It's an episode, though, that runs over a lot of very familiar ground if, like me, you're somebody who's been reading Superman comics for a long time. And that's not necessarily bad, especially for a show that's really trying to draw in people who really aren't familiar with the comics. So the whole situation with, yeah, Superman for whatever reason is depowered briefly, and that's when there's a crisis hits, and he has to sort of deal with that situation without his powers. Um, there's I can't remember exactly what caused it. I think it was the after effects of some red kryptonite or something. Um, that instead of normally sort of causing Superman to act wildly out of character, it had caused him to actually temporarily lose his powers. And that's when the villain Mammoth, who normally is an enemy of the Teen Titans, you might actually remember him from the Teen Titans cartoon, went on a rampage in Metropolis, and Superman's like, well, okay, I don't have my powers now, so I guess I'll have to go and try and just talk him down. And I can't remember who. I think it might have. I can't remember. One of his friends who knew who he was like, no, no, you really don't want to do that. Like, call somebody in the Justice League to handle it. And Superman was like, no, somebody could get killed before they show up. So he goes and he talks to Mammoth, and Mammoth is like, oh man, Superman, I'm gonna kill you this time. And Superman just is like, dude, you and I have fought before. I've won every single time. Why don't you just give up peacefully, spare us all a lot of misery, and, you know, just just kind of make things easier for everyone, because you know this how this is going to end. You know, don't let your pride get in the way of what you know of your good sense. And and of course it worked because comics. Um, Now the whole like Superman calling this sort of situation a solar flare, like he uses too much power and then he kind of loses his power for a little bit. Okay, that's new. Now, yes, it's true and has been for a while that Superman is sort of regarded as a living solar battery, that if he's low on energy from whatever reason, some villain has tried to drain his power, or he's not been around Earth's yellow sun for a long time, then yeah, he can start to lose his powers. But he's been shown that, I believe it's even explicitly stated, because of the efficiency of his cells, that he just basically needs just a couple of seconds, and bam, he'll shoot back up to right where he needs to be. Now that's comics, and I think this show does portray it a little bit more realistically. That yeah, it takes Superman a little bit of time to build back up to where he needs to be. Same way as how if I need to recharge my phone or my iPad, I can't plug it in and bam. Believe me, I wish that was, especially with my phone. With my phone, I'm still rocking a 4S, and the battery life on that is terrible after all these years. So So again, kind of familiar ground with Superman lore, but again, this is most of the people who are watching. This is probably going to be their first time seeing something like this, so that's forgivable. The whole thing with an adrenaline rush causes her to get her powers back. Okay, no, that's excuse me. That's something I've never heard of before, and frankly, I think it's a little bit dumb. But okay, whatever. This is another episode where we continue to see that they're really sort of playing Maxwell Lord up as sort of this riff on Lex Luthor. And while he's in the comics, he's portrayed as an extremely intelligent guy. Manipulation is really more his thing. Now, of course, here he's very manipulative. He really sort of plays it up with the public, saying like, "Hey, look around. We need Supergirl more than ever, and she's not here." And he does, in all fairness, in the way Lex Luthor often does, make the point. It's like, hey, we shouldn't depend on these jokers in long johns and capes to come and save us. Human beings need to be able to look after themselves, which is not an unreasonable point. I mean, after all, the human race got along for a very long time before Superman ever showed up. So Superman is someone who I kind of like a lot of superheroes. Superman is like a fireman. He's there when there's a disaster. He deals with problems. He's a reactionary in a lot of ways. Maxwell Lord is sort of saying, okay, we can't depend on these like this. While he himself sort of sets himself up as being someone who is proactive. And again, that is a fair point. Most superheroes are reactive. Okay, something bad happens, they go off, they deal with it. Being proactive is doing, of course, something before something bad happens. Superheroes, not usually the most proactive bunch. And of course, it's also interesting that he was able to sort of suss out that Supergirl had lost his powers. But then again, Superman's been around for something like 10 years, and he's doubtlessly, in to understand Supergirl, studied Superman quite a bit. The whole thing of Superman sort of not having his powers, and then there's someone who dies, and even sometimes he does have his powers, and he's not able to save everyone. The whole point there being that as powerful as he is, Superman can't be everywhere, same for Supergirl, of course, and he can't always save everybody. I remember there was this one time where Superman was like trying, it's the exact same situation if I remember correctly, trying to help somebody who had had a heart attack, but it was just too late. There was nothing that he could do to save that person. This is when he had his powers. Now here they kind of conveniently work it so like, oh yeah, if she had her powers, she could have saved this guy. But yeah, I don't know. That I think, well, I suppose that's maybe another lesson for another time. But that does kind of go to the whole thing. Superman can't be everywhere. He can't always save everybody, and that's something that he always has to struggle to accept. He has to accept that, you know what, I need to have my personal life as Clark Kent, because otherwise if I'm Superman every single moment of the day, I'm just going to go crazy and burn out. A lot of people think that Superman is overpowered and all of this other stuff, but what they really don't realize is that one of Superman's biggest problems is that he's only one guy. He can make an enormous difference, but he can't be everywhere. He can't save everybody. And the fact that he can't do that, that's always something that weighs heavily on his mind. If he's stopping a disaster in another part of the world, and a disaster happens somewhere else at the same time, well, what does he do? A lot of what works with making Superman a good character isn't what he can do, it's what he can't do. And that identically applies to Supergirl, especially here on the show, where they're, as I said, sort of running over a lot of the familiar ground. Like one of my favorite examples is that Superman can't do anything about really racism or income inequality. These aren't things that he can go out and punch somebody in the face and have it go away. And again, this is something I really hope they explore with Supergirl in the near future. But yeah, I think that kind of covers everything that I had to say on that one. Nothing particular to say about Jimmy Olsen this episode. This is another episode where Cat Grant is a bit of a mixed bag. Now, she is very genuine in her desire to help the people of National City. On the other hand, they think for some reason that her going on TV and giving a speech is going to calm people down. This is like, imagine if there was a major disaster in Seattle and Bill Gates somehow gets himself on TV, tries to calm people down. Well, I mean, the intentions are very noble, but why in the hell is anybody going to listen to Bill Gates in this situation? I mean, honestly, I was a little bit tempted to compare her to Donald Trump there, but I don't dislike Cat Grant that much. On the negative side, she also, Wynn threatens to fire Wynn. Now, in all fairness, he did break a piece of equipment. But this is after Cat Grant has shanghaied an IT guy to basically set up a TV studio in her office. Her office is in the world headquarters of a major media corporation. But she's not willing to go any further to try and find somebody who can set that up for her than the room immediately outside of her office. You mean to tell me in that entire skyscraper there's not somebody who is properly trained in how to do this? Again, the headquarters of a worldwide media corporation, and the best you can do to set up a thing in your office for doing a broadcast is the dude whose job it is to fix the computers. I mean, never mind that whole ego rant about how the world economy will be destroyed if she gets sick. I mean, come freaking on. Let's see. Now, I did like that scene with Kara trying to talking down the guy at the convenience store. That's, a very inspirational, classic Superman sort of thing. I mean, that was good. Laid it on a little thick, but, it's forgivable. And I definitely did like the whole how you see her arm tremble, because, remember she had broke her arm, uh, broken her arm. She had broken her arm, I believe is the grammatically correct thing to say there. Yeah, if that sort of thing does happen to people, as I understand it, when they break their arm, that it'll sometimes tremble in certain situations. And of course, Jimmy taking that really cool looking picture, a very nice moment for him. All I could just think of when I was watching that is like, okay, she's really lucky that the person doing this is apparently a good person who is just really desperate at the moment, rather than some tweaker in need of their next fix who doesn't really give a crap about anything except said next fix. Because if it had been that sort of person, they probably would have blown her head off right there. Then again, the Superman and Supergirl are usually meant to be more optimistic characters, so again, that's forgivable. Let's see. I did like that bit at the end where Cat Grant confronts Supergirl about, like, hey, where the hell were you? Which, fair question, and I'm sure Cat wasn't the only person in National City, well, her and Maxwell Lord, who were wondering that. What I really love about that scene, though, is that Kara deflects this question from this, ace media lady, mostly just by flattering her, and Kat totally falls for it. Now, I don't think Kara was being insincere here, but just stop and think about it. Kat Grant is portrayed as somebody who, when she wants to be, can be this really hard-nosed, hard-hitting, ask the tough questions reporter. Supergirl flatters her a little bit, and she just sort of immediately drops the, hey, where were you when we needed you most questions. So it's just like, oh, man. Oh, and then Kara's aunt and goons jump Supergirl at the end, because, oh, yeah. So, yeah. Now, let's move over and talk about what's going on at the DEO. Now, here, they introduce us to Gem, who's portrayed as this evil alien conqueror guy, which is really weird, because in the comics, and in all fairness, I've only ever read, like, one story that had Gem in it, and in the comics, he's actually a hero, something of a pacifist, if I remember correctly. He's actually very similar to the Martian Manhunter. And he'd been captured by some villains who were sort of using technology to exploit his psychic powers. I don't think he even had any lines in that story. He was just some unlucky alien guy who was strapped to a chair. I think that was Grant Morrison Justice League or something, if I remember right. Here, though, he's portrayed as this sort of evil conqueror guy, a lot like the character of Despero. Now, the only reason I can think that they would do this is sort of take the Gem name than the Despero personality, is that Despero is usually portrayed as a fairly big deal in the comics. He's somebody who routinely tangles with the Justice League. While here, Gem is just basically a one-shot character who's killed off by the end of the episode. Now, you don't really want to kill off somebody like Despero like that. It would seem kind of insulting to the comics fans. So I think they just sort of mush the two characters together, and well, I imagine there might be some fans of Gem, who in the comics is actually referred to as Gem, son of Saturn. Again, he was really meant to be a very thinly veiled riff on the Martian Manhunter when he was originally created. Like I said, I'm sure there's some people out there who do like the character, but tough tacos for them, I suppose. Now, the Martian Manhunter. Now, we had been talking about this for a while, that Hank Henshaw might be Martian Manhunter. Here, this speculation is proven to be true, and oh man, that is some good makeup. That is some good special effects. That, when he turned into the Martian Manhunter, decked out in his new 52 costume, I was like, man, Because Martian Manhunter, when well done, is a fantastic character. He's like the one character who has always been in every incarnation of the Justice League since the thing started, like back in the 1960s. Like 1963, I think, was actually when they first started doing the Justice League comics. Um, yeah, if I remember right, that would whatever. It was somewhere late 50s, early 60s. I don't remember exactly. But yeah, and I do like how they tried to portray him saying that his name was John Jones, which is how most people just basically say it. They tried to make it sound as alien as possible. And again, that's kind of one of the holdovers from the fact that this character art was created, I believe, in like the mid 1950s, and that's just how people rolled back then. But yeah, Martian Manhunter is, like I said, he's a staple member of the Justice League. He's considered like one of the big seven in the Justice League. One of the big top guys that is almost always in the Justice League. And just an all-around interesting and cool character. I also noticed that they mentioned that he was found on Earth in South America. Now, one of the interesting things that was done with Martian Manhunter, I believe it was John Ostrander, the writer who came up with this idea, is that while most superheroes hang out like in the United States and other first world nations, Martian Manhunter splits his time between there and popping around to the other countries of the world. He like spends a lot of time in the southern hemisphere, where specifically there he's actually as famous or even more well known than Superman, because he's basically one of the few superheroes who takes an active interest in second and third world nations, who very rarely see superheroes stepping in to help out when they need it. I mean, occasionally some sort of natural disaster or whatever, but going to those countries and actively doing superhero stuff. Yeah, Martian Manhunter is really one of the few heroes that actively does that, and he's probably the most well-known hero who does that. Although, as I understand it, that sort of thing has been backed off a little bit in recent years. I think I'm not exactly as up on modern DC as I used to be, simply because Final Crisis and New 52, I can't really keep up very well. I'm not even sure what's canon very much anymore at DC these days. So, yeah, I am really excited to see what happens next episode. I mean, here we have this iconic DC character um, popping up who's going to be part of the show for the foreseeable future. I mean, Martian Manhunter, this guy is a big deal. And then they're picking up the thread with Kara having to deal with her aunt, which also big deal. And I gotta say, it really wouldn't surprise me if somehow or other Mr. Danvers does turn out to be alive somehow or other. Because it just sort of feels like, you don't bring Dean Cain in for something like that if you aren't going to bring him back for something a little bit more substantial. Now, yes, there's no reason to think that Martian Manhunter is lying, but you never know. I mean, there's all this kind of crazy alien technology rolling around. Certainly would be interesting if somehow they use some of that to perhaps resurrect him. But again, that's just me throwing out some speculation. So, with that said, guys, I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And, of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Till next time, take care and have a good one.